One French fry equals the toxicity of one cigarette. Doctors do learn what dietitians learn, but that's very limited. What we do learn is most of it is not true. Never before in history, to my knowledge, had an entire organization done the deal with the devil, which they did. Kids born in the year 2000 were going to live to be 120. And I was like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a health catastrophe unfold.
So today I invited Dr. Cate Shanahan to talk about an important topic, seed oils. So welcome, Dr. Cate. I really appreciate you being on here.
Thank you so much, Eric, because this is such an important topic, and I am so delighted to be able to speak about this with you.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring you on is because you're basically the first person to really bring this kind of mainstream, this really important point on some of the dangers of seed oils. But I just want to very quickly give us a little summary on, you graduated in 1994, right?
Yes, from medical school, yes.
Medical school. So in school, I'm sure they don't probably give you a lot of information on nutrition or even food therapy, right? Am I correct?
We had a nutrition course. We learn what dietitians learn. Doctors do learn what dietitians learn, but that's very limited. What we do learn is most of it is not true. So I'm sure you've had people discussing before. Salt doesn't cause hypertension. Fat doesn't make you fat. Sugar's not the ideal fuel for our cells. So, most of what we learn about nutrition is actually misinformation. And so it's dangerous. And so doctors are actually dangerous when if you're trusting your doctor's nutrition advice, you're going to end up sick.
Yeah, even if they bring up the topic, because I don't even remember any doctor that I've ever been to ask me, okay, so the first question is, what have you been eating?
Yeah, they'll bring it up, if your cholesterol is high, which isn't actually a problem, that it's a problem they've invented. Like they'll bring it up under limited circumstances, but the medical doctrine is not to look for real root causes. And so that's what really lights a fire under my parts about getting the word out here, because if we could get to the root cause, we can fix everything. And I've seen it happen, hundreds of times personally and thousands of testimonials now, as I'm sure you have since you give similar advice. But the degree of, how powerful it is and just how much we can prevent. It's just so exciting. And it's so simple if you boil it down the way that I do in my latest book, Dark Calories.
I got your book, and it just is, I love the title of the book, Dark Calories, because it just pulled me right. I'm like, oh, what's that all about, right? So I have a series of questions I want to ask you, and I want to dissect this topic, starting from, how can you possibly take seed oils, which is very unstable? What do they do to preserve it?
So the oil actually is problematic because they initiate the formation of toxins, and that there is no preservation. What's happening is invisible toxicity is developing in the bottle. Most of us can't even detect what would be a signal that these oils are no good, which is called rancidity, which is different from oxidation. It's oxidation.
So it's not, so these oils are not necessarily, are they rancid or are they oxidized?
They are both.
Okay.
And it depends on the time frame you're talking about. So the oils that are bad are all seed oils that have these unstable fatty acids, as you mentioned, but they have also been refined, bleached, and deodorized. And all of the stabilizing factors that were in the seed that makes the seeds actually even nutritious in some cases, those are stripped away as part of the refining. The reason that there's no rancidity actually is part of the refining too. That's a necessary part of the refining. And it's actually the free fatty acids that make it rancid. So things like olive oil can also go rancid, right? But they take a longer time because they've got the stabilizing factors and they've got the better fatty acids. But it's just the problem with these oils is the lack of any nutritional value pretty much whatsoever. There's very few.
In nature, you have these seeds that have protective factors. So we're removing all that stuff. And in the industrial process, What are some of the stages that you go through? You mentioned like bleaching and things, but what do they actually do to turn the seed into this oil?
Well, the first thing they do is they create a crude oil using a lot of heat and pressure
Mm.
that extracts the oil. And this process can be done with what they call cold pressing. Once it's kickstarted, you cannot stop it. So these toxins will continue to develop and multiply and even change. Like some toxins that are there at day 2 after refining are gone by day 14. And then when you
Interesting.
cook with them, you get more toxins. When you reheat it, you get more toxins. So by the time you've made the, say, a French fry, which is cooked in, regular French fry from a fast food joint, continuously heated for a few days or weeks, the average French fry contains as much as smoking a cigarette. One French fry equals the toxicity of one cigarette.
What? Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So that's how they multiply. I mean, so this multiplication problem is real.
Could we relate this to free radical exposure or not? Is this just a different type of toxicity?
Free radicals are definitely involved. They're involved in the process of creating the toxins because oxidation and, free radicals are kind of slightly different, but very similar in that they destroy our cellular membranes. They destroy our cellular health, both of them, oxidation and free radicals. If you have oxidation, you're going to get free radicals. If you have free radicals, you're going to get oxidation.
So when we're consuming this seed oil, what is it actually doing to our membranes?
The toxins that form in the bottle, that form when we cook with seed oils, that form in our foods when we cook with seed oils, those toxins have the capacity to damage our cell, and it just will not function because these oxidation reactions are the very thing that triggers the inflammatory response system. You see this on your skin, right? With a sunburn, actually, is the simplest form of visible membrane oxidation damage. And it happens worse when you have a high seed oil diet because a little bit of toxicity, a little bit of oxidation reaction becomes unstoppable on a high seed oil diet because of how it affects us. There's so many other consequences that, I have to write separate chapters about each of these. It's just unbelievable. But the good
Wow.
news is that means it's the most powerful lever by which you can improve your health. And none of this is something that I learned in medical school,
Yeah,
let
right.
me go without saying. Right? This is all stuff I had to figure out because I wanted to be able to help my patients,
Mhm.
really, truly help them. And I didn't feel like drugs were doing much.
What initially got you to start looking outside the box? Was there something that occurred?
I met a family, a 4-generation Hawaii family, and the grandmother this is the great grandmother who had brought in her great grandson. And she was in her 80s and in stellar health. Her chart was about 5 pages thick, coming in for, tetanus shots and stitches. And her great grandson was just 10, but he was on 3 daily medications, had thick bottleneck glasses, braces, lots of chronic allergies, chronic learning disorder problems. The dominant narrative was we had just spent the 20th century expanding our longevity. At the beginning, it was like 40 years. By the end, it was, 77 on average. They were predicting that kids born in the year 2000 were going to live to be 120. And I was like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a health catastrophe unfold right before my eyes. I'm a family practice doctor. So that's why I was caring for all these different generations. And I knew the family intimately. And I was like, I had just met the great grandson. And that was the tipping point because I'm like,
Mhm.
this is wrong. And I've got to get to the bottom of this. And I also had my own health problems, my own health challenges that had kind of just spurred me to start looking into nutrition as well. And so I felt like I needed to get to the truth because the narrative was saturated fat was the problem. And so I was like, okay, so what is doing this to us? Is it just the deprivation of nutrients? like Weston Price talked about, or is there something else going on? And two halves of my life came together because before I went to medical school, I was a biochemist. I went to Cornell for biochemistry to get a PhD in being able to modify bacteria to digest plastic. And
Right.
as soon as I found out about like these oils that were everywhere and I hadn't been paying attention, I was like, this is so important. And I just dove into trying to figure out the connections. And really, there wasn't anything. I couldn't just read something that existed. I had to use the understanding of biochemistry that I had gained before going to medical school, and then kind of push that into what I learned about medicine to create basically a whole new way of thinking about the root cause of disease. And that's what I've been writing about for like 14, 15 years now.
Wow. On top of this heart healthy seed oils, so you're thinking, oh yeah, it's fine. That's just been ingrained in our minds. How can they claim that?
The doctors don't know that the data that supports that claim was bought and sold by Procter and Gamble, who funded the American Heart Association, the entire organization. There have been doctors who, like individual doctors throughout history, who were willing to, take money and say whatever, say cigarettes are healthy. That happened repeatedly. But never before in history, to my knowledge, had an entire organization done the deal with the devil, which they did. The person who stepped up to basically defend seed oils is Ansel Keys. And Ansel Keys had this big idea that saturated fat clogged our arteries, but polyunsaturates being liquid wouldn't. I mean, really, it was really that simplistic and frankly stupid idea. That's not how the body works. He wasn't a medical doctor, but he went around the world with all this money that Procter and Gamble gave him, creating just reams and reams of paperwork that passes for evidence. Because nobody reads it. Like when I look at it and when I read it myself, I was like, I can't believe this stuff ever got published. It's basically random musings and rantings. There's nothing systematic about it. And it contradicts itself because there's other authors who disagreed with Keys because he was kind of a jerk.
Wow.
And he was trying to gaslight everybody that was working with him into going along with his theory. What the evidence wasn't showing his theory was right.
Wasn't there another book called The Prudent Diet that was pushed at that time?
The American Heart Association got behind this other doctor who was promoting his diet book, which was full of seed oils and margarine, because he saw the trend coming, right? He was they were interconnected buddies. And he was like, oh, okay, great. So this is the trend. So let's jump on this trend. I'm going to write a book that basically the American Heart Association, supported. There was mutual interest. They supported each other. And it became wildly popular to avoid saturated fats thanks to that book, which again, no evidence, but it was so promoted and popular that it radically changed what Americans ate forever.
This is going to go down in history, unfortunately. I don't know when there's going to be class action suits. Like trans fats have been around for like 100 years, and they finally says, okay, now it's bad after 90 years. My goal is just on a grassroots level to get people to be aware of this and start to avoid it and do the alternative things. But what about the relationship between seed oils and insulin resistance? Is there a connection there?
This is so important. And this is what I call my energy model of insulin resistance, because insulin resistance is nearly ubiquitous in this country. It's something close to 99% of the population was found to be insulin resistant on a large survey done and done in the year 2006. And it's probably worse, but nobody knows what the root cause of insulin resistance is. And people are talking about it being carbohydrates. And I would say that that's not what the science suggests. It boils down to the fact that your body fat, when you've been filling it up with the polyunsaturates from seed oils does not give your mitochondria the fuel that they need, and it can actually hurt your mitochondria.
I just want to just pause there because this is like very interesting. We consume fats, we consume carbs that turn into fats, but seed oils, I just, people assume, well, they're just burned up as energy, right? Just burned up just like any other fuel. But
Right.
that's not true.
That's not true.
Wow. Wow. So they get stored somewhere in the fat cell or something, and our bodies can't use it effectively, or
They get stored in the fat cells. That's exactly right.
wow.
And because of the amount that the average person is eating now, where 80% of their fat calories are coming from seed oils.
What percentage?
80% of our fat calories are coming from seed oils. Now, it's not all polyunsaturates. It doesn't mean our body fat
Right.
is that many polyunsaturates, but it has way more, right? It has normally, historically, somewhere around 5%, maybe less. Some people say more, but somewhere around 5% historically. And now people have something like 20, 30, 40%. We've changed the chemistry of the largest organ in our body, our adipose fat tissue. And it's making us crave foods that will raise our sugar because that's an alternative fuel, right? So just our cells are like, well, fat's not working for us. They don't know from polyunsaturated or whatever, but they do know another fuel is glucose, always in our bloodstream. And that's the key to understanding this connection between seed oils and obesity, and seed oils and insulin resistance, and seed oils and all metabolic diseases.
Wow.
Right? That's the key.
I'm developing an app to pick up and scan and be able to identify seed oils in foods because it's in mayonnaise, it's in dressings, it's in pretty much all the restaurants. You can't find a restaurant without them cooking something in seed oil.
Yes, so that's why in the back of Dark Calories, I give people a script to say to different restaurants in different settings. Like I help you navigate this because it is a minefield. The entire world wants to shove these oils down your throat. They don't care. It's cheap. There's all these excuses they use: high smoke point, neutral, nobody's allergic to it, like peanut oil, for example. And so it's everywhere, and you have to have your defenses ready. So that's what the last third of the book, Dark Calories, does, is it gives you the defenses you need to protect your health and your family's health, your children's health, everybody you care about.
If a person is trying to figure out what to replace it with, can you give us some ideas on what are some safe oils that we could cook with?
Yeah, so I have my favorite 5, but I list a delightful dozen in the book. So my favorite 5 are olive oil, butter, coconut oil, peanut oil, and sesame oil. There's so many choices, and these things are delicious, right? It makes your food taste better. Because the other thing about these deodorized oils and being refined is they have no flavor agents in them. And what they do, since they're so slippery and wiggly, these polyunsaturates that are flexible, breakable molecules, they totally coat your taste buds. So they actually kind of can make it harder for you to taste other things.
Wow. I didn't know that. If someone stops consuming seed oils, how long does it take to get it out of your fat cell or your body? Is it possible over time?
It is absolutely possible. And it takes a while because we're talking about, exchanging pounds of molecules, right? So the estimates are somewhere around a year and a half. A lot of people do focus on, oh my God, I don't want these things in my body. And I have to wait a year and a half. That makes people feel panicky, and they want to try all kinds of unproven detox methods and stuff like that. You don't need to, because you are going to be able to help your mitochondria to improve your energy and all the good things, reverse insulin resistance. Starting from day 1, you start to improve your mitochondrial function because the foods that I recommend in Dark Calories give your mitochondria energy. They help you get energy. And the other thing that they do is they help support your body's antioxidant system, which is so,
Right.
so important so that your mitochondria aren't quite so susceptible to, shutting down from burning a little bit of PUFA, a little bit of the polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? And so we really need to eat a diet that helps our body create our own antioxidant enzymes from scratch. It's enzymes that we need, which are biological machines made out of protein, and they use vitamins, they use minerals to do their machine work of capturing the free radicals and literally catching the bad oxygen molecules. They break these free radical chain reactions. They block the oxidation, but it's enzymes that we need, and they come from protein. And a lot of folks, a lot of women, especially menopausal women, I've found don't get anywhere near enough protein in their
Right.
diet.
Right. That's really important. So what I'm going to do is I want to put your link in the description, and I highly recommend everyone read that book because it's called Dark Calories. Amazing. You won't be able to put it down. It's just filled with gold information that wish we would have got like 30 years ago when I started getting interested in nutrition. So I just appreciate you spending the time giving us this data, and I'll have to have you back on real soon. But
I would love
thank you
to.
so much.
I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Absolutely.